Welcome back to the Pirate Monk Podcast. Very excited today. We have our old friend Chris Simning, who was on the show like 6 years ago, but he's back. He is back from Phoenix area, not Phoenix proper.
It took him 6 years to get to kind of get over the trauma of the first appearance, I think. Was it? We finally wore him down.
So we are excited to have you, Chris. Welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be back.
Now, Chris is on his downtime. He's usually spending his summer at camps, speaking, and all over the place. Barely home in the summer.
That's right.
So you're relaxing, you're chilling.
Oh, it's been amazing. Like waking up the other day, I'm like, where am I? Oh, I'm home. It was a good feeling. I loved it.
And it's pretty good that you have a job where you can leave Arizona during the summer and come back in the fall.
That's right. However, I will say this about traveling to places that are humid. You think, you're out in the desert heat, but when you go to humidity, you're like, you know what? I think I like Phoenix. So Phoenix is a dry heat. That's their sell to get you to move.
It's you guys and us. I had one of my most awkward moments on stage in Phoenix. There were probably 500 people in the audience, and I stole a guy's joke that I had heard years before and said, man, so California and Arizona are two of the lowest ranked school systems in the country. We were like number 2 and 3 at the time. And I said, but don't feel bad, Arizona, because we're not stupid. It's not the same. It's a dry stupid. And I thought that was such a funny joke. And I tell you that Arizona people had no sense of humor about stupidity. It was so awkward. So for those of the audience that don't know the amazing Chris Simning, give us the version of your story. I've heard the long version of your story, and I love it, but we won't have any time for questions. So give us the shorter version of your story.
Sure. So I was born with a condition called fine motor cerebral palsy. It was really mild that you can't even detect I even had it. And then I was fine. I did everything everybody else can do. I shrivered in my hands. That was the extent of it. And so I always typed in school. That's how I got through school. I went to bed in 8th grade. I woke up the next morning. I couldn't hold my head up. And we thought, maybe you just something wrong. And so but it did go away. I couldn't lift up my head for many days after that. And we started going to see doctors and then specialists, and that turned into hospital visits. And 2.5 months later, after I woke up that morning in the 8th grade, I was diagnosed with a rare muscle nerve disease called torsional dystonia. And it's the twisting of your torso, so it affects things like your voice, the way you look, the way you walk. And my whole world was shattered in 8th grade. And being a guy, 8th grade is a bad time for something like that to happen because of puberty. So I dealt with that. And then it got worse through my 8th grade to my senior year of high school. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was confined to a wheelchair. And I never thought I would ever walk again. And I sat in a wheelchair for about 5 years. And God, I guess, ordained me to be a speaker because I started swimming just to be with other people with disabilities. And it was through water therapy that I actually regained my strength. My doctor told me to throw away all my medication. So I don't take any medication still to this day. And I started to walk through the process of being involved in swim therapy for about 2.5 years. And I went off to college, got my degrees, and when I got done with school, I felt the Lord was saying, you need to go tell your story. And I've been a speaker ever since.
Wow. So a big part of your story is to younger people. Why does your story resonate so much with these younger audiences? I mean, that's really where you started. I know you've branched out over the years.
I think because the youth culture of this age, by the way, I never would like to go back to that age. And I feel like the older we get, the worse at what they deal with and what we dealt with. It's a lot more difficult for them. I feel like youth are in a place where they're really trying to seek out what truth really is for them. And go to all these different avenues that's just falsehood to try to find their purpose, trying to find their identity. So when I was going through my disease, dealing with the struggles of that, I got name called. People thought I was stupid and idiot. I was no good. I wasn't good at much anything. I dealt with father issues, and I just realized youth today need somebody who's been broken in life to speak truth into their souls, because every one of us is broken. And that's why I think my story resonates, because when students hear it, my story for the first time, I get a lot of them coming up to me and asking me questions. And we enter into a dialogue and conversations about their loneliness, their frustrations, their rejections, and they're able-bodied people. So I know that everybody deals with an aspect of brokenness. And that's why I think my story relates to this culture of youth, because I think they're trying to finally see through the veneer that everything they're trying to do to seek truth is not working. And they want what's real. And I feel like my story gives them that.
Now, you have a part of your story that is really enlightening for community and for the courage of friends and what it means to step up into friendship, and then also what it meant to you.
Mm-hmm. So, talk about embarrassing moments. I have hundreds of them. I'm embarrassed quite a bit. And when I was younger and dealt with things, and still to this day, I deal with issues with just falling down or tripping, or maybe accidents that I have to clean up my feces, my mess, and where I just lose control. And I have core people in my life who they overlook things like that, and they really do not care that that's an issue. And it takes people big enough to overlook stuff like that to befriend me. And when people do that for me, that's how they gain my trust. And I realize that these people are true friends of mine. They're real people. They're real friends, and they're willing to get dirty with me. And it's amazing to me, and it's an eye opener to me that when they reached out to me and when I was struggling through issues, I realized how much loved I was, and that made the whole difference in the world to me.
Because where were you at high school mentally and emotionally? I mean, this was you're getting worse. You're moving towards a wheelchair. How much did those friends exhibiting God's love really save your life back then?
So I grew up in the church since I was about 8 years old, and I didn't like church for a long time. I thought it was boring. I thought it was a waste of my time, but I was made to go. My mom was going through a divorce, and she became a believer through that divorce. And here I am going through this difficulty, and I didn't even see Jesus when I was hurting. I was angry. Where are you? It just makes no sense to me. If you're a God of love, then why do I have to deal with stuff like this? And it took those people in my life, those friends, who they didn't preach Jesus to me. They didn't do it by words. They did it by their actions. And they did it quietly. And over the process of me observing how they were treating me through their actions, that won me over that I was loved by God. And that helped me a lot with my faith.
What were some of those actions? I'm thinking things like including you even if they thought, oh, we're taking Chris and that might slow down whatever we're doing.
Yeah.
We might have to stop for certain. What were some of the things that you went, oh, thank you for doing that?
So I was sheltered a lot when I was sick because I didn't want to go into public. I was very uncomfortable. I had anxiety issues because people stare at me. People look at me, and I'm judged immediately by the way that I look. I get that. And so I would be a shut-in some respects because I always felt like I was misunderstood. And still to this day, I feel like I've always misunderstood by people. It's hilarious to watch how people respond to me when they don't know who I am. And they'll talk down to me like I'm 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So during my high school years, people would come over and they would get me and they would take me and my wheelchair out to their car and fold up my wheelchair, throw it in their car just to take me out, just to help me be involved. And if we would go to high school football games, they wouldn't leave me in my wheelchair on the field. They would pick me up and carry me into the bleachers just so I can sit with people.
Wow.
There's a hospital trip where I went on that was a senior trip, and I was on medication at the time for my disease. One of the side effects is diarrhea, and I had diarrhea all over my sleeping bag one night. And a friend of mine, my age, he was a senior like I was then, he took me to the shower and cleaned up all my filth. Who does that as a senior? You're so self-absorbed in who you are.
Yeah.
That's disgusting to even test diarrhea of somebody else, let alone your own. And he did it. So those were instances of people showing up for me when I needed love the most.
So, Nate, this is all the external. Like Chris, sometimes the external is the most obvious to see, but this is the same as internal stuff, right? When guys are finally honest, they confess that sin, and they're afraid that the first reaction is going to be, we're going to pull away, we're not going to include you, we're not going to invite you. So how do you relate what Chris is talking about to the walk into honesty and brokenness?
You know, I loved what John Lynch says in the Heart of Man film, where he said, I always felt like there was something on my face that everybody could see that I couldn't. And something that made me unacceptable. And that resonated with me. One of the reasons that I, always brought another persona into the room was this feeling that if people ever saw behind the performance who I really am, how afraid and confused and uncertain and duplicitous I really am, that they would certainly leave me. And I think we all carry that, and so it takes. So one of the things that I have learned that one of the gifts that I can give to a new guy is to show something weak and shameful and ugly about myself. And the more I can talk in the present tense, the better. And that can give him the courage to kind of show more of his real self in order to gain the confidence that he's actually going to be accepted.
Because there's two parties in both what you're talking about and what Chris is talking about.
Yeah.
That Chris, you could have hidden, oh, I had this accident in my sleeping bag, I'm just going to put it under the bed and hide it.
Yeah.
And because I don't want people's help, I don't want to reach out. So you need the person who is a friend, a true friend, and then the willingness to let other people help.
Yeah.
Right. But I feel like in that situation, I was forced to call out because I was in a wheelchair. I can't get up on my own, so I needed somebody to help me. And I think that's a good lesson to learn too. It's that when you hit rock bottom, there's no place for you to go but to call out to somebody, and call out to somebody that you trust will be there for you. And I feel like that you hit it right on the head. I feel like when you're open with somebody about things that you struggle with, you got to realize that their response to you is not what you think it would be. It's not going to be rejection. It's going to be, you know what? I relate to that on some level. And I think that's what makes us in the community, because we feel that bond.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the gift of desperation, right? Once I get desperate, it's the greatest gift.
Right?
Okay, so there were two other. You're becoming my giant Samson metaphor right now, Chris. I'm making connections here. When you were talking, two things came to mind. One is that when people meet you, they can think, "Oh, this is a mentally disabled person," and you're a super smart guy that thinks no different than anybody else. So that's got to be number one. Just tell me how that feels.
It's extremely frustrating. Like, so I travel for speaking all the time, so the airport is my second office. There's a story where I go in and I go to a kiosk of an airline to check in, and I know how to do all this stuff, but there was an agent there who thought I needed her assistant, and she would come to me and she would get really close to my face, like almost like this. And her voice was lower now, like she was talking to a kid, and she would say, "Can I help you?" Like I couldn't hear either. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I got this. And she still didn't believe me. And so she stood right by the kiosk and watched every move I made with my finger to check in on the kiosk to get my boarding pass. And once the machine started to print the pass, she came up to me like this again, this close, and she goes, "Good for you."
Oh, no, that's horrible.
I'm like, what? Good for me, what? Yes. And so I went back to her and I go, "Thank you." Like, I always get mistaken that I'm stupid. And one of the worst insults that I can get is when people allude to me that I'm stupid. And it's crazy. I'm trapped in a body, and I feel like being a man, I struggle with what being a man is, because I believe what society has imposed on me about what manhood is about. And what manhood is about is something that I don't have. I can't fix things. I can't change the oil on my car. I can't go out and mow my lawn. I can't do manly things, but I feel like men are placed in a position where we always have to prove to other people that we're worth it. And that's exhausting to me.
So have you formed a new definition of what a man is, where you can see, oh no, I am a man?
Over the years, it's been a process for me. I still wrestle with it, to be honest with you, because I feel less than, like, quite a bit. And I don't know, I feel it's hard for me because I always feel like I'm misunderstood. And I feel like people don't really get me. And they stand off and they watch me like I'm an exhibit at a museum, and it's like I'm untouchable, but they're in awe of my story, but yet they don't really believe that I'm still capable to do everything that everybody else can do. And it's really frustrating.
You're more of a museum piece behind the glass to be looked at, but not to be touched.
I think so.
So Nate, how does it tie in? You know, Chris is saying, okay, I have this one disability, but then I get a bunch of other disabilities and issues assumed onto me. And I feel like, wow, if I confess one sin and people say, oh, you struggle with that, do I then get lumped into, you know, I have all these other gifts. I'm still useful in the body of Christ. God still loves me. But now, like, how does that tie in for someone that it's not an external experience with a lady at a kiosk, but it's a fear of something else?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how, we don't want to think and interact with people any more than we have to. And so we find stereotypes very useful. It's shorthand, relational shorthand. Mm-hmm. And we're very quick to pigeonhole other people, and we watch as other people pigeonhole us. We're not conscious of when we do it to other people, but we're very conscious of when they do it to us. Our Samson meeting last Monday night was led by a faithful member of our group, a real leader in our group, whose physical characteristics remind me a whole lot of Chris. He's got muscular dystrophy of some kind, or MS. I'm not sure what it is, but it affects his speech the same way it does Chris. He can usually walk with the help of a cane or a walker, although he's had to have some surgeries lately, spend some time in a wheelchair. He's a brilliant guy, married with kids, has worked, been a business owner, close to retirement now. It took quite a long time before anybody in our group asked Walt to become a Silas. A Silas is kind of like a sponsor, right? But the first guy to ask Walt to be a Silas was absolutely blown away. And then his stories began to circulate. You can't believe what Walt told me. It's like this reservoir of wisdom that this guy carries. But it took a while for anybody to look past the physical disability and see the solid spiritual man that he is and the fund of wisdom that he carries. So I love it when he leads a meeting. It takes him a little longer to go through the readings than it does some other guys. And if he's having a rough day, he might mix up some words occasionally. But man, does he lead a solid meeting. And I want to listen whenever he shares because he doesn't waste words. He's got something to say.
So I think there's an important role in friends' lives, whether, Chris, it's a situation like yours or a guy who says, okay, I'll admit I'm struggling with this sin and I know I'm now going to be put in this lesser category. I think it's an important role for us to affirm one another in those gifts that somebody verbally says to Walt, it is amazing to see what is in your mind. It is amazing the gift you give to other men. Like, we need to hear that. And then maybe it feels awkward sometimes to say just point blank, but I know I need point blank. I'd rather not assume those things upon myself, but receive them as a gift from someone else. And it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another parallel, Chris, that I'd never thought of till you talked about swimming. You said swimming so you could be with other people with disabilities.
Right.
And I had never considered, wow, okay, so here you are, you have a physical disability, and now you're being thrust probably into a community of other people with disabilities as if it's like, oh, well, this is where he'll feel most comfortable. But I mean, you're just a guy now around other people that others might feel uncomfortable with, and it's just assumed it'll be normal for you. I'm sure there was a lot more empathy from and towards that community. But that's got to be a little weird, right? That's a strange assumption.
Yeah, that's a great insight, actually, because I love those other students in the water with me. They had different disabilities than I had, and some more mental, most were physical disabilities. But I resonated with them. I could relate to them completely, but I resonated with them out of a deeper respect in all of their lives because I know that they struggle with misunderstandings and misperceptions just the way that I did. And for me to be in that category of being with other people with disability, it was helpful for me. And I feel a lot of times you're right, you said it well, Aaron, where people get lumped into categories for no reason of their own, simply because they look that part of what that category is. And I feel like when we talk about the issue of sin, I feel like sin is categorized in our culture of Christianity.
Yes.
I feel like a certain sin is worse than other sins, but in God's view, every sin is a sin and every sin is the same. And I feel like we as the Christian community, we have lumped sins into categories. And I feel like that's part of why Mintos share honestly about their struggles, is because when they do, they feel like they're going to get lumped into a category. Oh, that's where he belongs. No, that's not where you belong. You belong in the freedom of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And you need brothers to help you in your struggle to get through what you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And I feel like we lump people into categories, and that was a good insight, Aaron, that you made.
Thank you. I received that.
Yeah.
I just asked for verbal confirmation. You have given it. I am now filled for the day.
Well, I'm certainly familiar with getting the side eye when I say I'm a recovering sex addict.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to confess that early on in recovery, I wanted to make sure that people understood that my sexual taste, okay, so I'm a sex addict, done stupid things. My sexual tastes were, mainstream and straight ahead. I wanted because I didn't want people to assume that I ever was attracted to men. Because in my mind, that was a whole different category and it was below me, and I somehow was superior to somebody who battles an unwanted same-sex attraction. Now, I don't think that way any longer, and I have the greatest respect for my brothers who've been handled that thing, and they're going to live and walk in community as as men with that burden to carry. But
yeah, I wish sin is a thing. Fantastic. Nobody here's denying the existence or inappropriateness of sin.
Right.
But even that label, it becomes unhelpful in so many ways because it becomes kind of the final word. Is it sin or isn't it? And then we're done because now we've declared it to be so.
Yeah.
Instead of realizing all of this is just pieces of brokenness in the fall.
Yeah.
Whether it's physical, whether it's spiritual, whether it's habitual. And all of that has the potential to drive me towards Christ and the gospel.
Yes.
All of it has the potential to be the best thing in my life, or it has the potential for me to just become totally self-absorbed and indulge my own, whether it's whininess and depression or indulge my own flesh desires. But both potentials are there.
Yeah.
By just sticking with, well, which one's a sin and which one isn't, it stops as a bad thing and it loses all the beauty of its potential.
Yes. Well said.
Brokenness is a gift that goes undisguised.
Oh, say that again.
Brokenness is a gift that goes undisguised.
Hmm.
You have to get beyond the costume of what that is and be real in the midst of your brokenness, because God gives unto you as a gift to be used for his glory.
Wow. Yeah, for his glory, which is also manifest through me knowing him more. Like he's going to be glorified as he's revealed in his true character, which means I get to participate in the goodness of discovering a loving daddy in the midst of that brokenness.
Because your brokenness makes you desperate. Going back to the hospital situation where I was desperate for help. When you're broken, you are desperate. And I feel like brokenness goes undisguised in your life because you don't feel like your brokenness is worthy of attention. But that's exactly how God gets your attention.
Yeah.
And not to shape you in it, but to love you through it. Because you come to the fact of yourself where it breaks you to the utmost core that the only thing that you can do is be desperate and look up to him. And when he reaches down to you and takes that brokenness, he reveals to you how much you are loved and he walks you through it, and that in and of itself becomes your gift that God has given you, because he's made you through that brokenness, seek him, and drive you to be all that you can be in spite of it.
Beautiful.
So true. And here's where our presuppositions get in the way. When you were saying that, I thought of a friend of mine who was in his mid-30s and was still struggling when he would see like some picture of a woman dressed sexily one way or the other, right? And he was so frustrated with himself because he had the assumption that that brokenness should be done by his mid-30s. He should be like grown up, which, you know, what you translate that to would be, I think all breasts should look ugly except the ones attached to my wife, which those should be fantastic. Like it doesn't even make practical sense. But we were talking about this, and his assumption, his presupposition was this brokenness is supposed to be fixed so I can be more useful. So we said, okay, well, what happens when those thoughts cross your mind? Now, this guy was super disciplined, so he didn't go like get triggered and look at porn. This is the part of the interview where the dog walks in because the children have all left. I get tap dancing in the background of claws on wood. He wouldn't go and get porn or go do any acting out. He would cry out to God and be like, God, I don't want this. I don't want my flesh to do this. And he would just throw himself at the mercy of God. He would go to his wife and think, I need to focus on her. I need to love her well. So that was the result of his brokenness, his flesh going in that direction. And I asked him, well, what would you do if you didn't ever have those thoughts? And his answer was, I would get so much more done. And I thought, okay, wait. So you get miraculously healed and you just become a workaholic who doesn't pray as much or focus on his wife. But in your brokenness, you're in deep, desperate prayer to your daddy and focused on your wife. I said, I'm sorry, dude. I got to pray that you keep having these thoughts the rest of your life. Because it seems like a good thing. But that presupposition, he was haunted and shamed because he assumed something was supposed to happen that I don't think God intended.
Yeah.
Well, what about Paul's thorn in his flesh? What was his thorn? We don't know what that thorn was. It could be a multitude of things, but it just reminds me of God saying, you know what, I hear you, but I'm not going to take that thorn away from you because my grace is sufficient for you, because that's when my power is made perfect when you're weak. You need me. You're desperate for me. You need to seek me. That thorn is a gift. Your brokenness is a gift. I'm going to use it, but you have to step into that. So
how does Nate? How do you see when guys have the assumption? Okay, let's say I'm struggling with porn.
Yeah.
My assumption is this is supposed to go away. I need to stop the behavior and ultimately stop having the desire. That's got to be the spiritual goal.
Yeah.
What do you say to that? What do you think about that?
Well, I agree with you that God doesn't seem to buy into to our expectations and our plans when it comes to addiction. Yes, I do agree that the goal is to be free of the behavior. But the idea that the temptation to that behavior, the urge, is going to go away completely, that somehow I'm still morally culpable or defective if I'm temptable, that's insane. And for me, the only thing that really keeps me close to my brothers and keeps me, close to transparency and honesty is this deep conviction I have now that because this brokenness, because I still have this vulnerability to lust, I have to stay close to people or it's going to eat me up. If that were gone, I would become probably the biggest self-congratulatory, self-righteous Pharisee you ever met.
Yeah. nothing good would come of it. Not the
No.
spiritual good you would assume.
Yeah. I need the humility, the daily reminder. My continued vulnerability to lust is a reminder to me that I am no better than the crack whore on the corner. And it doesn't matter what anybody confesses to me about what they've done. I'm not a step above them.
Right. It's kind of like wearing that moniker, like poor Matthew the tax collector, right? Keeps getting called Matthew the tax collector. It's like, I left the booth. I'm not the tax collector. Stop calling me that. Or Simon the leper.
Yeah.
Clean for a while, guys. Well, there's a lot of Simons, buddy. You're Simon the leper. And
right.
I kind of felt bad about that. Lazarus, the previously dead guy, he doesn't just that. That it is part of the showcase. Like, no, Matthew, don't worry. We know you're not in the tax booth anymore.
Yeah.
But this is part of the story, and this is part of keeping you sane.
Yeah.
Because you know what kind of money you can make in that booth. We're gonna keep you out.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, Chris, any final words on community? This I've really enjoyed taking apart parts of your stories. It's story in this different way. This has been a little different.
I like it. Good parallels. It's like you're a good counselor because you listen, and when you listen to people's aspects of story, you take different elements of it.
Okay, so we don't have any time now.
So I would say use your brokenness for the greater cause of who it is that God created you to be. Use it not to be a crutch. Use it not to be a label. Use it not to be categorized. Because I feel like whenever we use it as a crutch or a label or a category, we become complacent and we get depressed. We get stuck in a slump. We get the woe is me attitude. When God wants you to rise above your brokenness, and be desperate for who he is in your life, for the way he wants to love you and show you that love so that he can work in you to will and to act according to his good purposes.
Mm.
You have a purpose. You have a destiny with God's eternal kingdom, and you get to make that difference in the way that you choose to walk your life. A community is important to have a core group of people who know you for who you are. And when they know your weaknesses for who you are, they're able to reach out to you and encourage you on your journey to the purposes that God wants to magnify in your life. But don't stay in them. Keep moving.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you, Chris Simning. I love you, man.
I loved it. Thank you for having me this morning. I really enjoyed it.
Great talking to you, Chris.
You too. Thank you.
And we will be right back here on the Pirate Monk Podcast.